And here we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome, one and all, to Coffee Talk. That's right, it's time for Coffee Talk, where we will have as much of a cognitive discussion as possible about what is going on in the world today, taking a look at snippets from the news that we will read through with commentary. Very sarcastic and snarky commentary, courtesy of yours truly. And of course, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk on YouTube at Coffee Talk Live or at Prepper University, broadcasting simultaneously on both channels at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Fistful of Radio, that is fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. As we go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that were joining us in the live portion that takes place on YouTube. That's where you want to be because you may get your comment read. That's right. As I read through as many of the comments as is plausible to help people who are listening and not able to see keep up with the conversation, I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that have popped in thus far. Helter is here today. Donna Beaver, again, reminding everyone, thumbs up, like, and share. Yes, indeed, if you don't mind. Dragon is here. Brian is here. Brian wants to know if I'm going to do a hate mailbag video soon. Yes, actually, I will be, maybe within the next week. Bingo is here. Semper Fi is here. Urban Angst, all people. Sven is here in mid-Michigan. Boogers is here, as well as Cyberjack Sr. have chimed in to say hello thus far as we get ready to dive into the news. Oh, and I see Raccoon has joined us now too. Welcome, one and all, whether you chose to be post or not, that's fine. Going to start right in my neck of the woods, or fairly close enough to it, and that would be Atlanta. Back to Atlanta again. And this is an article from The Guardian. Protests as Atlanta Council adopts new rules for referendum on Cop City. There it is again. I wonder where that woman is from. Georgia, the country? Because that's been a big issue with this, is that a lot of the people that have been violent, that have been arrested, that have been protesting, they're not even from Georgia, Atlanta, or Georgia at all, let alone the United States. They're from all over the damn planet coming here and causing problems. So, into the article. The Atlanta City Council adopted new rules on Monday that would allow the referendum process for the public to vote on the Cop City project to move forward. The vote came amid protests against the methodology the council adopted for signature matching on referendum petitions, which critics say gives the city a way to block a public vote on the controversial project. Which, again, I don't understand why it's a controversial project. The city already owns the land, and there's already correctional buildings there. If they make a training post on that property, who gives a damn? Apparently, people in France and Canada and the UK care because they're the ones getting arrested. Quote, "It just comes down to democracy or chaos. Which one do you support?" Trim Franzen asked city council members at a hearing before being hustled from behind the dais into a brief protest. Today, this isn't even about a public safety center. It's about whether democracy works. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, we're supposed to be in a constitutional republic. I don't know why I have to remind anybody of that. Secondly, no, democracy doesn't work. It's a lie. Construction of the now $110 million Atlantic Public Safety Training Center began last spring after contentious hearings at which activists criticized its expense, its location in woodlands outside of the city, and the city's circumvention of public input. Again, they already own the land. There's already 2 correctional complexes out there. Protests began to escalate in 2022 and began drawing national interest after police killed activist Manuel Tortega Tehran near the center's construction site in January 2023. shortly after a state trooper was wounded by gunfire. Now, that's important to point out. The reason this guy got killed is because the protesters started shooting at the security. And I think there's been at least 2 shootouts on that site instigated by protesters, as well as, never mind the Molotov cocktails and the bricks and the rocks and everything else. So activists have subsequently sabotaged construction equipment and disrupted development at the site. The city attributed a $20 million increase in construction costs to the protests, though requests made by the Atlanta Police Foundation for additional details about these costs, hold still, have gone unanswered. The foundation is building the training center under a lease agreement that has been a focal point for public criticism. So now they're claiming they're going to put it to a public vote. And I'm like, okay, that will be interesting because, again, only people who live in the Atlanta area, who live in that county, technically should be able to vote on it. And that pretty much eliminates like 80% of the protesters, since they're majority out of state and even out of the country. Again, what the hell are they doing here? Raccoon says George Soros busses them in and provides the bricks. Probably. Monkey is here, as well as D-Lo is joining us here today. Bingo says, if you want to be a professional protester, at least have an easy name to pronounce. Yeah. But again, they blew it up about him getting shot. He wouldn't have been shot if there wasn't an exchange of gunfire to begin with. Why are they shooting down there? Monkey says, saw a documentary where there was a protest in Saudi Arabia and the police shut it down with lead bullets. Yeah. I've seen union protests in Africa where live ammo was used. You know, they don't mess around in other countries. Here, this is what we got to put up with. It's so easy to protest here. They fly them in from other countries to give us a hard time. It's ridiculous. It says the fight over Cop City has become a political football in Georgia politics. State and local police have arrested and charged 61 activists under Georgia's Racketeering Act, accusing them of crimes ranging from criminal trespass to domestic terrorism. And yeah, if you're breaking into state property and setting fire to construction equipment or throwing Molotov cocktails at police, you can get a domestic terrorism charge. The district attorneys of Fulton and DeKalb County, both progressive Democrats, have ceded prosecution on these charges to Georgia's Attorney General Chris Carr, a Republican with political aspirations. Excuse me, they all have political aspirations. That's kind of pointless to even point that out. It's like, it's like, why mention that? Oh, what? A district attorney or a local lawmaker who has, dare I say it, political aspirations? Say it isn't so. Say it isn't so. That's ridiculous. I think it's funny that they got to point that out. I mean, what do you think all these people are doing in politics? What do you think a person who decides politics is going to be their career, why do you think they do it? Oh, I just want to be an alderman. And that's it. Nothing else. I swear to God. Next thing you know, you're president. That's what happened with Obama. As you recall, he was an alderman for a heartbeat. Then he was a senator for like 2 months. And then suddenly he's president out of nowhere. Wonder how that happened. No political ambition there either. I promise. As we shift around here. Gary Edwards says he's sneaking into class late. You're going to have to see the principal after school. Shame on you. As we shift here to an article from the Washington Journal. $340 million in federal C virus aid was turned into cash transfers to subsidize illegal immigration. Oops. Okay, we're exposing even more of this corruption. But what will that do? What will that do? What will come of it? A shocking new report found that hundreds of millions of our tax dollars earmarked to help struggling Americans through the C virus pandemic were instead handed out to illegal aliens in Washington state. 340 million was taken out of the C virus state and local fiscal recovery fund, a federal aid program, and given to illegals in the form of $1,000 checks, according to a review of the spending by Economic Policy Innovation Center. Let me see here. Washington received $4.4 billion in total SLRF funding, according to Fox News, but set aside the $340 million so that illegals could dip their hands into the funds despite being ineligible to receive federal C virus aid. A report released by state officials last year noted that the cash transfer to the Immigrant Relief Fund was approved by the Washington state legislature in April of 21 to provide, quote, another round of funding for undocumented Washingtonians. Washingtonians, that's the best you could come up with. Washingtonians, that's embarrassing. In essence, the Democrat-dominated state legislature did an end run around the rules preventing illegals from getting federal C virus relief funds meant for actual Americans. The transfer was also approved by the Biden administration, according to Epic. This means the Biden administration directly subsidized undocumented immigration under the guise of C virus pandemic relief, the organization's report has explained. Washington enacted a similarly wasteful scheme as the Trump presidency wound down by carving out $128 million for the IRF, handing out $1,000 checks to 122,000 illegal aliens. Furthermore, state Democrats engineered the, quote, relief program to make sure it would not negatively impact a recipient's application for a green card. Even though this check is public assistance, because it's being funneled through a so-called C virus program, it would not constitute welfare in such a way that would prevent someone from receiving a permanent resident card, Epic wrote in its report. The IRF has stopped accepting applications for new payouts, indicating that the project is fully exhausted. Of course, they're out of money now. The group found similar programs shifting federal pandemic relief funding to illegals in Arizona, Illinois, Texas, and other states. The Biden administration has been actively encouraging illegal immigration by using C virus money from the SLFRF or SLRF to provide cash assistance, housing, legal aid, and other benefits to undocumented immigrants. Paul Winfrey, president and CEO of Epic, has told Fox. Big surprise. And you know what sucks about this? The only legal recourse, basically they broke the law because it was only for American citizens. And they found a backdoor way of funneling it left and right instead of straight where it was supposed to go, which is illegal. But the only recourse would be to sue the agency to recover the funds, but that's still tax money. You see what I'm saying? Okay, yeah, we'll get $340 million back somehow, but it's still going to come out of your pocket. It's still going to come out of your pocket. Catching up some comments, Monkey says apparently the bipartisan bill is sending money to Ukraine, Israel, and the border, but at the cost of majority limiting Greg Abbott's ability to control the border. Yeah, they've been fighting about that. That bill should not be passed. It should not be voted on. It's an outrage. And it actually sets the bar even higher for allowing people in here. It makes it easier because putting a cap on an imaginary number where there's never been a cap before, all you did was just not let people in. Setting a cap sets a precedence, and then the president has a veto power over that cap anyways. So they can say, well, 5,001 people crossed the border today. We're shutting it down. And the president can say, nope, you're not going to do that. I veto that. And he can do it for a 46-day at a time stretch, according to page 212 and 213 of that document, which is probably like 10,000 pages long and full of bullshit. But that's that's how it looks. It's an abomination. $118 billion foreign aid. It's a border relief and foreign aid package, which is an oxymoron, since roughly only 1% of it's going to go to the border. Damn near 70 million of it going to the Ukraine, and the rest of it being thrown all over the planet. And Gary Edwards says that's his state. Yeah, great. You didn't get your check, and now you know why. Monkey says it's literally undermining the state rights. Exactly. Helter says, I'm curious how much exactly they're going to give each individual migrant, and if they're also going to give any kind of special treatment to migrant families like extra assistance. Well, they're already getting extra assistance, and this money's already been passed out at in $1,000 increments. So $1,000 per person is how the article read, if I caught that right. Dragon says, but hey, if you work 2 jobs just to make ends meet, we are going to tax you more. Yeah, you go into a different bracket and you'll pay more ultimately. And Nature Nerd says the immigration bill is no different than the debt ceiling bills. That's a joke and unacceptable. And I agree. It's not something that should be passed. It's something that everybody, if they have an inkling of a conscience, should vote no on. They keep voting no on and telling Biden to stuff it. Sorry, this is unacceptable. You can't set a limit. There is no limit now because the limit is zero. Zero tolerance is supposed to be illegal crossings at the border or even processed crossings. It's supposed to be zero tolerance and a case-by-case basis for anyone who claims asylum to verify whether or not they have a legitimate claim at all. And he threw the gates open and people poured in, and now he wants to set a limit, and that limit's high. 5,000 a day, that's a lot. That's a lot. And again, still leaving the president with the ability to veto that. We need to close the border now. There's too many people coming across. Nope, I veto it. Get back with me in 46 days. It is a joke. It's an absolute joke, and the joke's on us that this is even going on, that this is being allowed to continue, that it's not being challenged, that the American people are ignored. Obviously, the American people has a problem with this. We don't want this going on. We don't want this to continue. We can see the writing on the wall that it's going to keep getting worse, that we're going to have more poverty, we're going to have more crime, we're going to have higher taxes. It's crushing this country. Never mind the social distilling that's going on. They're drowning us in other people's cultures who are not interested in the social structure of this country. They're not even interested in learning the language. I mean, like I said, if you can come, I've talked about it before, if you're coming here from anywhere and you want to assimilate and you want to contribute, that's fine. A lot of these people don't. They're offered a handout and they're taking it. Monkey says, hell, at that point, it might be easier to come in illegally and get more help than the average taxpayer. It sure looks that way. Do you fluently speak another language? Do you think you could pull that off? I got to ask. I have got to ask. And speaking of illegals, let's jump to New York really quickly and wrap this story up. You remember the Times Square attack. And this is a local news station report. You may not have seen this one. I think it's interesting. WINS Radio of New York. Suspects in Times Square attack on New York police officers have been rearrested by ICE in Arizona. So again, and you see a still image there of the police laying on the ground. 2 cops, 8:30 in the evening, told this group, move along, move along. They got confrontational. They end up in a scuffle with one of them, and the others jump in and tackle the police to the ground and start kicking them while they're down. It's all caught on video. They were grabbed. The police caught them, brought them to jail, released without bail, like almost immediately. Apparently, while they were released on bail, because there was outrage from the citizens of New York and from some lawmakers, all right, we want these 4 guys back. They turned up in Arizona. That was quick. I can't get to Arizona that fast. Come on. A couple of comments here. Donna says now we have more DOCA kids. Yeah. And SDA is here, and he or she is in Toronto, joining us from Canada. We got more Canadians in the room. Urban says in Richmond, British Columbia, the majority of the population is Chinese speaking, both legal and non. Only 25% of the residents are white. Many jobs, especially in international logistics, require fluency in Mandarin. Scary. And Gary says to brag, liberal Marxist. Now here's the story. And again, this is a local radio news network report from New York. WINS WCBS. It says several men charged with attacking police officers outside Times Square's migrant shelter were reportedly rearrested by immigration officers in Arizona on Monday night after they allegedly fled the city and headed west by bus. The migrant men were arrested at a Phoenix area Greyhound bus station by members of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security investigations, law enforcement sources have told. It's unclear exactly which of the suspects were taken into custody. Those initially arrested in the attack, Yorman Revron, 24, Darwin Andres Gomez Iziguel, 19, Wilson Juarez, 21, and Kelvin Servita Aroca, 19, and Yoni Brito, 24, and Johan Boda, 22. That's 6 people. The initial report said 4. That's interesting. According to the report, Revron Juarez, Acora, and Gomez Iziguel are the 4 men who allegedly fled from Fort California after they were released without bail. While the men were released, they faced additional charges if they don't return to their next scheduled court appearances in the city in a few weeks. Officials have said they were staying in the city's migrant shelters at the time of the Times Square's incident. All right, they're illegal aliens anyways. They're illegal aliens. You release them without bail and you expect them to show up for court? Is that the idea? Naughty, naughty, you attack police officers. Make sure you come back for court, okay? We're going to put you on the honor system here, buddy. And of course, and I guess it says they were fleeing to California. They got as far as Arizona. They got as far as Arizona, I'm assuming, because there was warrants, because New York wanted them back, again, on account of the outrage. This is something that's considered to be quite unacceptable. So lawmakers in New York had to do something. They put warrants out. So basically what you're telling me is that if they had decided to drive to California instead of using transit, buses, trains, airplanes, they probably would not have been caught or found. They'd just be walking around in California somewhere. Is that the idea? Dragon says giving a pass to foreigners beating on the local police is a very dangerous message to be putting out there. Seems like this is the American nightmare. Can you imagine, Dragon, can you imagine if you did that in Mexico? Can you imagine if you did that in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria? You attack a police officer in the street in Nigeria, you probably won't make it to jail. I mean, how is this tolerated? How is this tolerated? You see what I'm saying, right? Especially in second and third world countries. Are you kidding me? Helter says no bail for illegals attacking anyone, especially a police officer. If illegals can attack cops and with no consequences, what kind of message does that send to other illegals? The message that they've already received getting here. You can do whatever the hell you want. look at the theft of scooters and electric bikes in New York. It must have spiked 1,000%. They're all lined up in front of those shelters with the license plates torn off. Nothing's being done about it. They're committing crimes all over the place. They got a curfew for the shelters now because these people are going door to door, knocking on people's doors and begging and using their free phones, Google Translator, to beg for them because they don't speak freaking English. I mean, they already got that message. That's why they're acting like this. Urban says weaponized homelessness, weaponized drug zombies, weaponized migration, weaponized legal system. Guess who it's all weaponized against? I don't know. Tell us. And Urban says if this is what they do to cops, imagine what they'll do to you. And more to the point, again, back to what I was saying about trying that with a cop in another country, where they came from, they wouldn't be able to get to court if they attacked a police officer in the street like that. They'd be beaten so badly, they'd be sitting in the hospital for a month before they could even sit in front of a judge. It wouldn't be tolerated where they come from. But here, it's okay somehow. Can you imagine? I mean, again, I'm not... What are you doing? Cat acting funny back here. I'm not a fan of law enforcement because there is a stark difference between police and law enforcement. And what we have now in this country is law enforcement officers. And I don't trust it. But this is unacceptable. Eric Peter says California wouldn't have sent them to New York with their sanctuary city status. Yeah. They should have gone to Chicago. It's closer. Monkey says, I seriously feel bad for those that crossed here legally and worked their ass off. They end up clumped with the ones that go around the process. It's embarrassing for them. They worked hard. Some of them worked really hard. They learned the language. They got permits. They got a job. They're paying taxes. You know, they're trying to do the right thing, trying to start over. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't care where they came from if they came here and they're doing the right things. There's way too many here that are not. That came here for the free ride. That's Granny Smith in the corner there acting silly, trying to get under the closet door for some reason. What are you doing, girl? Now she's attacking her tail. You ever seen a cat chase their tail? Granny Smith and Daniel both do that. They both chase their tails. And Daniel has a ridiculously, freakishly long tail, too, so he can almost catch the damn thing. Oh, man. Nature Nerd says we shouldn't allow illegal immigrants in schools. Yeah, and our schools are packed with them. Our schools are going bankrupt and property taxes keep going up because we keep allowing illegal immigrants to be in our schools for free. And our property taxes went up the last cycle also a lot. And the majority of what we pay in property taxes is school tax. It's like 82% of what we pay is school tax, and we don't even have a kid in public school. It's crazy. And this is something that's been going on for a long time. Some of you know my stories from when I used to work for the Juvenile Justice Authority and the illegal immigrant that I got stuck with. And they didn't tell me that she was illegal, a 12-year-old. And they put her in my facility because they wanted somebody who was able to keep an eye on her because she was highly promiscuous and was causing a lot of problems in the co-ed facilities. Which co-ed facilities, especially when you're talking corrections, is a completely foolish idea anyway. But they put her in mine, no paperwork, nothing. Her book was blank. I didn't have anything for her. Turns out she was an illegal immigrant. And her parents were in custody somewhere else, but she was in the care of the Juvenile Justice Authority for some reason. And they were like, whatever you need to do, don't worry about it. It'll be covered. So medical, enrolling her in school. They enrolled her in school with no identity at all. Something I can't do with my kids. All of it paid for by the state under some, I forget what program it was. And this was years ago. Can you imagine how much is that's going on now? Monkey says they found out there's a county in their state that's a sanctuary county, but you don't hear anything about it since it's mostly a rural area. And I'll catch up a few more comments here real quick, and then we'll move on. Nature Nerd says illegal immigrants shouldn't be able to go to our schools, shouldn't get welfare or tax benefits. That would lower legal immigration quite a bit. And Urban says, I understand there are law-abiding immigrants who are squeezed to keep their silence. Many illegals naturally end up in immigrant neighborhoods where they are protected by the legal ones. Yeah, that's a problem. And Cruising, who does work in public schools, says that they can confirm almost 1 in 5 of their students have no social security number and require extra services because they aren't English fluent and are illiterate in their native languages as well. Yeah, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And Urban says that was a good point by Cruising. Yeah, many migrants are illiterate in their own languages, and we expect them to learn English. Yeah, and if you get a translator who speaks their language proper, have a lot of difficulty with them. That is true. And all people asked about thoughts on the decision by the 3-panel federal judges that ruled against Trump's presidential immunity. I don't know. I haven't heard too much about that. All people. I haven't heard too much about that yet. But we're going to bounce to Europe. We're going to bounce to Europe because this is going on. And this is from the Week UK. It is very weak now, actually. Why Europe's farmers are protesting. Yeah, okay. We'll see. It says, thousands of farmers in France took to the streets to protest a variety of alleged grievances against their industry, claiming that the French government has hindered the progress of farming as a livelihood. All right. I'm going to correct something real quick, or I'm going to interject something really quick. First of all they do in France is protest. It's the protesting capital of Europe at this point. It's been ongoing for years. Nothing gets accomplished. France is a socialist country. Works really well, doesn't it? Secondly, the government, every government is hindering farmers' progress. They're all hindering farmers' progress happening here in the US. It's happening all across the Western world. Thirdly, it's not just France that there are protests, because there's additional protests in a variety of European countries right now because of how these people are being treated. So here we go. Farmers near Paris saddled up on their tractors to barricade highways. The move effectively blocked the paths in and out of Paris in what the farmers are calling a siege on the French capital city. And while the protests in France have started to dissipate, what began on the streets of Paris is now spread across large swaths of the European Union. Mirroring protests from agricultural workers have been seen in Belgium, where a blockade brought the Belgian-Dutch border to a standstill. Farmers in Spain and Italy have also begun a series of tractor blockades, and additional demonstrations have been seen in Poland, Germany, Romania, Greece, Portugal, and more. Why are farmers protesting? Okay. It says a variety of issues have plagued farmers throughout the continent. This includes a burgeoning bureaucracy, as well as wider issues, including the increasing cost of farm diesel, late payment of EU subsidies, or competition from imports. One of the main grievances revolves around an ongoing revamp of the EU's $59 billion common agricultural policy. $59 billion. The EU describes the initiative as a partnership between society and agriculture that ensures a stable supply of food, safeguards farmers' income, protects the environment, and keeps rural areas vibrant. It sounds like a lot of bureaucratic oppression, if you ask me, to get a handout from the government, which is usually what that turns out to be. Part of the revamp, which aims to make a policy, the policy more eco-friendly, includes a requirement that 4% of farmland remain unused to help offset lost crops following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And farmers have long argued the measures will make the European agricultural sector less competitive. What I've heard is a lot of bureaucratic red tape is a problem. I don't think it mentions it in this article. I'm not seeing anything reading ahead. A lot of too much government oversight into their business, too many fees, issues with pesticides, there restrictions on pesticides, stuff like that. Gary Edwards says in Europe they're trying to limit food production in order to drive up food prices and lower the population on the front end, which is a globalist tactic. Helter says the French don't mind their strikes affecting other countries, but when it affects them internally, it's a different matter. That's the European Union for you. All People says political analysts are theorizing the ruling against the Trump by the 3-panel federal judges will come back to bite the Democrats in their butts. Everything the Democrats are doing right now is biting them in the butts. Everything they do to try to hinder Trump makes him look more legitimate. Nature Nerd says farmers and truckers show that you don't need a union to strike. No, you don't. And Dragon said the French can't have a complete rebuild without a total failure of their system. They have so many laws on the books that are ignored or not enforced. And then Bingo says, didn't the farmer protests start in the Netherlands, not France? The protests in France were about something else, correct? Yeah, there's been protests off and on about farming practices and government interference all across Europe for years. And yeah, I believe there was farmer protests and blockades in the Netherlands as well a couple of years back, right? And Monkey says, from what they heard, Germany's notorious for bureaucracy. All of the Western world countries are on that bandwagon at this point. Tons of bureaucracy, tons of interference, tons of paperwork, lots of fees, lots of fines, lots of regulations, lots of bureaucrats who look over your shoulder and don't even know what you're doing, don't even really understand your job. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians, as they used to say. And how much of that are you supposed to tolerate? I mean, you're trying to work your fields. It's a tough life anyways, especially if it's an independent farm and not an industrial one. You're busting your ass all day. It might be a farm that's been on the books for generations, trying to maintain it, trying to keep it for your lineage, for your children. And you have to slice through red tape constantly, being overcharged for wet feed that you've got to burn because it's no good. They do that a lot with the chicken farms. If you don't cooperate, they'll sell you, because a lot of the farms, especially if you got an industrial contract, you have to buy their feed. And if they don't like you or you're a quote troublemaker, they'll send you rotten feed and you end up having to dispose of it and buy more. And they'll bankrupt you with that kind of bullshit. That happens in the United States all the time. And Urban says they were excited during the Yellow Vest protest years back, and there was an incredible number of people for months in support, and nothing. Yeah, nothing. Protesting a lot of times doesn't work. And sometimes you feel like it's not working and you give up. Like what happened in Canada with the trucker protests. That was working. That was working until they hit everybody in the bank account, until they threatened the tow truck companies who did not want to get involved. Tow these trucks out of here or lose your license. What are they supposed to do? You know, you put the squeeze on a couple of people, other people will fall in line pretty easily. You can't get the kind of, not in the modern era, people have gotten weaker, I believe. And you can't get the type of group cooperation that you did during the protests in India with Gandhi, or in the South with Martin Luther King, where everybody was on board when Gandhi said nobody go to work tomorrow, and nobody did. and there was no electricity and no running water, and the trains weren't moving, and no one was in the streets. That sends a powerful message. You can't get that nowadays. You can't get that from people nowadays. I can't see it. And then when someone tries, again, like the trucker convoy that blockaded in Canada, they're like, oh, wow, that looks like it could work. Until they shut your bank accounts off and then threaten the tow truck companies to pull the trucks out. Nature Nerd says developers want to build medium density housing or apartments on farmland, so farmers protest. This happens in America too. And Urban says there are still political prisoners in Canada. RCMP was clearly trying to stitch up the operation, making wild accusations of truckers collecting weapons and other slander. Yeah, and that wasn't going on. From what I have heard and what I've seen of it, it was relatively peaceful. They just parked and sat. They weren't trying to riot or stir up mess or damage property. Gary Edwards says eliminating the small-time farmer puts food production in the hands of the elitist corporation. This is why Bill Gates is buying up so much farmland in America. Yeah, unfortunately. They want it all under one umbrella. And you know what that makes me think of? Rollerball. The original, not the remake with LL Cool J. The remake is garbage. The original with James Caan, that's exactly where the world was. The world was run by the corporations. There was no government, and they had it divided up into sections: luxury goods, food and beverages, transportation. It was just a series of companies, and each company completely enveloped one entire function of society. And that's where we're headed for in a lot of respects. If you haven't seen the original Rollerball, I suggest checking it out. It's not about the sport. There's a tie into the sport Rollerball and why they're trying to force Jonathan to retire. But what's happening in the background is really the message of the film. Now, Diversity Hire of the Year award goes to the police chief, Pamela Smith. I was reading this article, and you can't tell me this is anything else. This is anything else. So one more here. Gary Edwards says, I have the Rollerball soundtrack on 8-track tape. There you go, Gary. DC Police Chief, DC Now News Now, DC Police Chief continues to make history. Yay, there she is, Chief of Police in DC, making history yet again, folks. Listen to this. Pamela Smith has been a consummate history maker. In 2021, Smith was chosen as the first ever African-American female of the United States Park Police. Then she resigned a year later to take a job with the Metropolitan Police Department and as its chief equity officer. And last year, DC Mayor Muriel Bowser made Smith the first Black female police chief in the history of their department. For the law enforcement veteran who grew up in a troubled home in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, with a mother that struggled with alcohol and ended up in foster care, Smith has been making Black history for years. Quote, I certainly didn't see the path of becoming the first African-American chief in the agency's 230-year history, Smith told DC News Now. Smith said she had mentors, several big city police chiefs, who have been encouraging her to chase her dreams, and they were instrumental in her applying to be police chief. They were like, you can do it, she said. You have what it takes. Smith said that when she applied to the chief's job in D.C., she stayed silent. I didn't call anyone. I prayed and I said to the Lord, Lord, if this is what you want me to do when I wake up tomorrow, allow this to be on my mind, Smith said. Wow, that all sounds so phony. I'm sorry. That all sounds so fake. It really does. I mean, she's the first Black and By the way, it would be shocking to you to find out how many black people are offended by the terminology African American. They don't like it. Okay, let me just tell you, unless they're in politics or media, they don't like that term. Most of them, at least the ones I've spoken with. Excuse me. She she jumps in the last 2 years through three high level positions that a black woman has never held before. And I'm not supposed to believe these are diversity hires. Thoughts on that? Urban says the only violence they saw from was from RCMP, Ottawa Police, provincial police, and some other very strangely paramilitary uniforms with tags that no one seemed to recognize. That's interesting. Nature Nerd says the elites get furious when their money stops from mass protest. These are the type of people that will lay thousands of people because of speculation. Brian says diversity just means less white people. And Helter says they hired an HR lady to run the MPD. They're screwed. Yeah, I mean, look at the jobs. And all within a 2-year period again. I believe, right? 2.5 years. So the first female of the United States Park Police resigned to take a job with the Metropolitan Police Department as its chief equity officer, which is just pathetic. And now the first black female police chief in the history of the DC Police Department. And then she's got her prepared thing about praying and mentors and all this other stuff that sounds totally made up. I wonder if she really believes that she earned it or if she's in on it. If she's if she was the chief equity officer for the Metropolitan Police Department, my guess is she's in on it and it's all an act. That would be my personal guess. But I mean, that's all so phony, and it gets put on a pedestal to put this woman on a pedestal and talk about how great she is as she rotates through all of these diversity jobs. You couldn't find another black woman that might have been qualified to do any of those jobs. You got to use the same one over and over. All People says get another diversity hire always appointed, then later will be discovered to have hailed from a migrant family. There you go. Dragon says before taking her current post, Smith served as the MPD's chief equity officer, leading the department's efforts on DEI. The South Park pandering episode is turning into real life. Well, that episode is art imitating life. Monkey says, I remember a person from a private university that came to my rural high school, and the student representative was looking for someone with color and diversity. Our high school is majority white. And Monkey says the only DEI we got is that there are females and maybe one or two alphabet soups. This is completely a diversity hire. I believe that. Her description of like praying and all this other stuff, it says, it sounds rehearsed and phony. Quote again, I think it had everything to do with that I was prepared for the job. And again, not thinking about history until someone told me that, hey, you know, you're the first. Like I didn't know it until somebody said it. Yeah, sure. But then earlier here, you said that you had people patting you on the back and telling you that you were the right person for the job and not to worry about it. So you knew or you didn't. Growing up was really tough for us, Smith said of herself and her brother. We were kind of raising ourselves. Join the club. That's half the country. I had a rough upbringing. I bet you I'd be willing to trade. I don't know what to say. That's just it offends me because I believe this is completely a diversity hire. I don't know if she's qualified or not. I can't tell. She rotated through the jobs pretty quickly, bouncing from one to the next. The first of her kind, quote, if you will, for each of those positions and rotated through them rather fast, don't you think? That all escalated quickly. Oh man. Monkey says this was 11th and 12th grade at the time. Thank God I went to community college, which he's talking about there. And all people has some words to say about the term African American. Yeah, the Black Americans or darker skinned Americans that I've talked to, whatever you want to call them, don't really like that term. Don't really care for that term. Besides, which are you first? Are you American first or African descendant first? If you're an African descendant first, then what are you doing in America? You know what I mean? Urban says the first Black woman to successfully fail upwards multiple times, or a great socially constructed value for an entire race to aspire to, ? Fail upwards or fall upwards? I know what you mean, though. But Obama's the same thing. Barack Obama was the same thing. He goes from an alderman to a senator. And I can't remember. I might be exaggerating, but I thought he was a senator for like 2 or 2.5 months. And then he's running for president. He wins. Monkey says, when I asked if someone with disabilities is in the DEI area, I was told no. But since we're talking about presidents, we may as well talk about dear old, sweet old, lovable old, reliable old, huggable old, honest old Uncle Joe, sweet old Uncle Joe. Article from the Hill, Biden on Trump calling for the debate. I would want to debate me too. He wants to debate himself. I would want to debate me too. President Biden on Monday told reporters he understands why former President Trump wants a debate between them, because Trump has time on his hands. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you are the sitting president running for re-election and Trump is the Republican forerunner. That's got nothing to do with it. It's because Trump has time on his hands, according to Biden. Trump called for a debate against Biden during a radio interview on the Dan Bongino? Is it Dan Bongino show? Saying, I'd like to debate him now because we should debate. Trump added, it's for the good of the country for them to debate. Quote from Biden, if I were him, I would want to debate me too. Well, you know, he kind of has to if you're the sitting president and you're running for re-election, Biden. I don't know if you knew that. Biden told reporters in Nevada when asked about the comments, quote, he's got nothing else to do, the president said. Actually, Trump is pretty freaking busy bouncing back and forth across the country, trying to make a presence at every one of these court proceedings for all these kangaroo courts that have been set up to hem him up and keep him from being able to properly allow for his bid for presidency to run its course. He should be out there campaigning. He can't do it. Fortunately, the media is campaigning for him because he's in the news constantly because of all of these lawsuits and all of these other legal issues that are being thrown at him, most of which look like they don't have a leg to stand on. Weak as water, as they would say in the UK, lending credibility to Trump's entire campaign because he looks like someone that's being oppressed by the government, that's having courts and the legal system weaponized against him. And again, there are a lot of people who can emphasize with that because they've had trouble with the government or they've had trouble in the courts themselves. You think Biden wants him to win. Oh, I would want to debate me too. Biden talked to reporters Monday on a trip to Nevada ahead of the Tuesday Democratic primary. Before leaving on Monday, he visited number one boba tea at the Chinatown Mall in Las Vegas after meeting with culinary union workers in an employee cafeteria at the Vidara Hotel. Yeah, stir up more shit with unions, why don't you? They're already striking in Nevada. Trump did not participate in any of the Republican primary debates. He said on a radio interview with Hugh Hewitt in December that he looks forward to debating Biden. How about 10 debates, he said. Meanwhile, the Biden campaign in December said it hasn't talked about a political general election debate against Trump. They don't want him to debate Trump if they can avoid it, because Biden is not sharp. Trump is old too, but he's sharp and he can talk off the top of his head. He doesn't need a teleprompter, he doesn't need an earpiece, and he doesn't need a speech laid out for him. He can just talk. Sometimes he says foolish things, but he doesn't need someone to tell him what to say. Monkey says, I would debate me too. That's called a shower talk. Yeah, talking to the soap. Gary Edwards says, Trump-Biden debate without teleprompters would be interesting. It would be embarrassing for the Democratic campaign. Monkey says, Biden handlers, when Biden wants to debate Trump, dear God, this is going to be torture. It's torture listening to this guy talk anyway. He can't stay on track, even with the teleprompters. He's all over the place. And then Helter says the fact Democrats are doing everything to stonewall Trump's bid for the 2024 presidency shows that they are afraid Trump has a shot of winning. Yeah, I agree. He has a pretty good shot of winning. But then again, remember, your vote doesn't really count when it comes time for the Electoral College. And we'll see how that works. But quite frankly, even his own party is tired of Biden and Harris. The Democratic Party is tired of them. There's been too many problems. It went too far south. It got too messy too quickly. But this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And no, Trump didn't debate the forerunners. And I don't blame him for that, because what's the point? None of them were going anywhere. Chris Christie, seriously? I mean, look at the people that were on that panel. The smart thing, if you know you're the forerunner, or if you know you're at the head of it, is to wait for them to thin themselves out. Let them eat each other up and debate whoever's left over. That's what Trump did. It was smart. That was smart. Why waste his time? Brian says votes for Biden were just votes against Trump. Yeah, 81 million. I have so many issues with that number. A lot of people do. Most people, I think, question it. Maybe not at the time, but certainly after the fact. Sat there and said, gee, I wonder if that really sounds plausible now. If that's realistic. If there really were 81 million plus votes for Biden. But, that's election denial, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful taking it beyond speculation, because Big Brother is watching. And Gary Edwards suspects that Vivek wants a vice presidential spot. That could be. That could be. And Monkey says, remember when Illinois effed up their voting system and got 500 million votes back in the 50s? Yeah. And Nature Nerd says 90 million votes in the 2024 election. And then Urban says, question it. We'd be putting it mildly. No one really believes the 81 million number. It's ludicrous. Yeah, but I'm live on the air, so I got to watch it. And speaking of watching it, watching the time, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Dusty, everybody who can see, sleeping in the chair. I got 3 in the room right now. Uncle and Granny Smith are still in here with me as we get ready to wrap up. Again, you are watching and or listening to Coffee Talk, and you can find me on YouTube at Coffee Talk Live or at Prepper University, simultaneously broadcasting on both channels, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, if you care to find me there. And of course, there's always Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation. And with that, we'll wrap up and see you again tomorrow.